R.C. Sproul. And this was my prayer for y'all. Please be with my beautiful people and help them to live the message of the world above and be the light of the world. To love you, to love others, and share the hope of the gospel of Jesus. That's what we're about. That is what we're about. So I want y'all to be weird, really weird. I'm not talking about weird as the world. Yeah, it might be weird as the world sees it. Yeah, it'd be certainly be weird as the world sees it. I just finished the chapter where David Green and his wife made the decision that half of the profit that they make in Hobby Lobby goes to spread the gospel of Jesus. So when you go in there and you buy the $59.99 Walmart, the profit on it, that can probably cost them $7. And buying such quantities. $7. So $60 less 7, that is what? 43. No, $53. Now they have overhead. And I would think that would be at least 50% with benefits. So that brings that down to $25. And so $12.50 goes to spread the ministry of Jesus. That's good. That's good. The Hartford Business Review would not recommend anybody to do it. Nobody. So, let's make Jesus first. We're going to have a test on Wednesday. This right here in chapter 4, section 4. I think there's probably 12. There's probably 12 of these benefits of federalism in that book. I want you to pick out 4. I want you to pick out 4 that you can remember easily, that you agree with, that you like. Okay? And I would know those 4 because every time I give you all one of these things, generally there is a test question about it. And then here's one of the 8 or 9 or 12 that's in the book. I want you to specifically know how it affects our two-party system, being the Republican-Democrat control of our politics. How does it benefit that? And that will serve you really well Wednesday morning on about the 3rd page of the test. Okay? So we'll go over that one in our short period tomorrow. All right. Now we're taking notes. I was supposed to give that to y'all Friday. Y'all were already ahead of me. And quite honestly, I forgot it until y'all were walking out the door. I think it's snapped. Okay. About the ball game Friday night. I thought Cedar Creek had a football team. No. They do. They do? Yeah, but Cedar Creek didn't look too good compared to y'all. Well, the last match up there 2 years ago, the game was real close. Did y'all expect it to be closer? No. No? The coaches didn't? Huh? They expected it to be a blowout. Oh, y'all did.
No, they did too.
What is this? So you went to the front office and checked in? Mr. White, I didn't like seeing you on the sideline. I did a high ankle sprain. How long will it take you to get over that?
Hopefully today.
Well, show me what a high ankle sprain is.
High of an ankle and a sprain.
Huh?
It's like a sprained ankle, but like high.
Yeah.
It's like that ankle. That's key.
Higher. You want to teach today? Somewhere we got right in here. In our notes, where did we get to, ladies?
Agreement of the same states. Next slide. A little ahead.
Yeah, we kind of missed that. This was on the quiz 2 times. One, the pure definition of it, and then down there, well, I don't know. On one of the versions, it was down there, and I think it might have been the last question on the test, or the next to the last, where the Gulf States Fisheries Commission, and, you know, that is an example of an interstate compact. Your book had the toll bridge over the Hudson River that is jointly maintained and jointly built by the states of New Jersey and New York. Okay. They're like in contracts, and they ensure accountability. There's an interesting one of these. Usually it's over the transportation of hazardous materials through one state or natural resources. Those are the two biggest things right there. Like, for instance, there's a nuclear power plant over here on the Mississippi River, on the Louisiana side of the Mississippi River. The waste products from that gets on trucks, and I guess in those big tanks that, you know, and they get permission. Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona has formed an interstate compact to allow Louisiana or any of these other states that have nuclear stuff to travel down Interstate 20 through those states to get to Arizona to dump it in the desert. If you want to dump it in the desert, but I mean, they take it out there where there's nothing but rattlesnakes and lizards and cactus and get rid of it. A good example. A decade or more, maybe 2 decades, the Tennessee River. There's a dam on the Tennessee River, and there's a dam, and it's in Tennessee. But Tennessee, since that river flows on into Georgia and down through that way, they had to have an agreement that should a severe drought come, that Tennessee would allow open the floodgates of this thing and allow water to go downstream. Well, there was a severe drought in the southeast. In Tennessee was a little bit nervous because they didn't want to let go of much of that water because there was no rain in the forecast. Georgia had to remind them through a summons that they'd go to court if they did not open those gates to let that water get in the river for the Georgia farmers and municipalities get this water to drink. So anyway, enough on that. It's kind of neat, though. You kind of see how, every state in our system has some sovereignty, but yet we're one nation, and there are resources that collectively we have to share with one another, and we do that through these contracts. These things are approved by Congress. If there's a dispute, and guys, this is a test question. When there is a dispute between the federal government and the states, what clause of the Constitution do they look to resolve the dispute? supremacy clause, and which of the three branches is going to be the avenue to determine whether or not they're violating the supremacy clause? The Supreme Court. If there is a dispute between two states over contracts, over anything, who is the referee or the umpire? The Supreme Court. Okay. Not the states themselves. Okay. All right. We didn't do the states' rights versus the nationals' rights. I sure thought we did. Let me see what this is. Peter said 5 minutes. We got it. Will you get the something? Okay, he's in Montana. What's happening? Sorry about the sound. He's not too good of a shot, is he?
Now, that's one of the arguments I'd write down on tonight's homework. See, that's the national. Okay, so you just saw a states' rights believer there, and he used one of the uh, what I think is the best arguments are that's a problem of the states, and who's best to solve our problems than to start at the lowest level. Okay. And there Montana was. Now, what this has been sometimes back, I think this thing came out about 2012 or so. We've had a couple of Supreme Court decisions that is curbing Congress's interpretation or their use of the necessary and proper clause to imply that they can regulate guns or state laws on guns using the interstate commerce clause. So our current conservative court is pulling back and narrowing the definition of commerce to say, no, you know what? You can't make a law banning the owning of a weapon in Washington D.C. Oh, they didn't. They had their law was well, you could own a weapon, but it had to be disassembled. Kirk, can you imagine somebody going to break in your house and your dad says, "Now wait a second, I've got to get the trigger assembly on my gun." That's just stupid. But that's the Beltway of America. Chicago. Oh, we don't like guns. There's too many murders, so we're going to do away with some guns and we're going to restrict guns. Well, Mr. McDonald took all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said Chicago can't restrict. See, this is helping keep federalism alive. The Supreme Court said the federal government can't Chicago can't write a law to restrict gun ownership in Chicago because that's violating their Second Amendment rights. And that's too broad of an interpretation it's too broad of an expanse of power for Chicago to take those away. So all that's to say, guys, is the states versus the nationalist rights. I would know those. I thought we went through those. This debate has been going on since even before the ratification of the Constitution. Remember, some of those guys was saying, "Oh, we're giving the anti-federalists, we're giving up too much of our power to the federal government." So this tug of war between those has been going on ever since the Constitution was written and we agreed to abide by a stronger national government. Modern day conservatives tend to fear an all-powerful and expansive federal government. Now, we can't just put that on that spectrum here, conservatives fear it, because it determines who's in power. As soon as Donald Trump took his oath of office, actually before Donald Trump took his oath of office, Barack Obama's Attorney General, his first name is Eric, I'm trying to think of his last name. He was hired by the state of California. What is Eric what? Hired by the state of California to help them navigate state law where they would fight the federal government. Now, this is so different than usually in a liberal administration. They would fight the federal government from enforcing federal law or creating federal policies that stepped on the affairs of the states, particularly immigration. Okay, we don't want the federal government coming in here and telling us we've got to enforce the laws to prevent illegal immigration. It's just one of his things. Eric, what's his last name? I hate that. I'll think about that as soon as y'all leave. Liberals tend to favor a massive government expansion into the state's affairs. They believe a one-size-fits-all is a good thing. I tend to believe that these that are calling for this probably have never been in Wyoming or never been in southern Louisiana to see how, people in Flyover America live. Now, I mentioned this before, and y'all wrote this down earlier, but there are 3 powers of our national government that they have used with the broad interpretation and the use of the implied powers through the necessary and proper clause to reach into the affairs of the states. And that is to tax and spend, the war powers, and the commerce powers. And we've given examples of each. Okay. Your previous homework, y'all put taxing power and to use that to regulate business or incentivize business to do something they want them to do, or states. Okay. War powers, that's, the science and education, the economy and education. Commerce powers. The Supreme Court, depending on whether it is controlled by liberals or conservatives, have interpreted Congress's commerce power to include oversight of wages. Y'all gave me those examples. Transporting goods and services, sale, manufacturing, and selling of goods. And y'all also gave me an example in your homework that they've used the commerce power to enforce the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And that's where I told y'all about the hotel, part of Atlanta Hotel. I'd have y'all's quizzes graded yesterday if I hadn't gotten so wrapped up in the next section we're going to study. Good stuff on the American civil liberties, civil rights. All right, let's move up to the next one. Now, this is what? There's quite a few questions on this, and what we're seeing here, this political cartoon, has it. Look here. Who's the federal government? Well, it's the big guy, isn't it? Holding the money. And the little guys are the states, and notice here, states' rights. Now, we want that money, but we don't want the federal authority, the strings attached. We don't particularly want that. So let's see how that plays out. Now, going so far, how many of y'all are more of a states' rights person or a national person? States' rights. How many? Nationalist. 1. No. All right. Y'all be able to defend that now. Either side. How many of y'all have flown in an airplane over the Midwest, the Great Plains? How many of y'all have done that? Most everybody? No? Did you look out the airplane window? You didn't?
I didn't fly.
You didn't fly. You haven't flown?
I went this way.
That way. Well, when you looked out the window, what did you see?
Clouds.
Did you look on the ground?
It was cloudy under us.
When I was in pilot school, in college, my aviation instructor said, "You're going to have to look at the dash every while." I was thinking, well, there's nothing out there in front of me, and I want to see what's on the ground. Checkerboard. Is that what you see? See squares? And in some places you're going to see circles because we've started using circle irrigation, and that's really old. But if you fly over Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and all the way to Denver, you're going to see a checkerboard like this right here. What this is a township, and that could be 6 square miles. Each one of these checks is 640 acres, what they call a section. Now, the first grants, now this is just a direct test question. The first grants in aid were given to the states for a specific purpose. Therefore, they're what kind of grant that we would call today? A grant of money to the states for a specific purpose would be a what kind of grant? Categorical grant. This came under the Articles of Confederation. This land ordinance of 1785 said, okay, when we develop the territories west of the Appalachian Mountains, we're going to go out there and survey and sell this and divide it into range, townships, sections. And we can sell these sections in here, but there's going to be one stipulation when we give this money back to the states, that when we sell this right here, when we sell one section out of 36, the money in this section goes back to the territories, back to the states, to be used specifically for elementary and secondary education. Okay, secondary would be high school, and usually up until the 8th grade. So the federal government sold this land because it was theirs. They sold this land, even though it's within a state, they sold that land, and that money went to develop little old schools, around in this 36 square miles, and you might have to walk a mile to school, but it set it up, and the emphasis was always been on, if we educate our children, they will become, and by the way, we're educating them in the Bible, they will become people of virtue. They will become individualists with the profit motive to make their farms, their property, make a living for them, and they will do fine. Okay, incentive. Now, moving up, I would remember this act right here, because I saw it on the test over the weekend. In 1862, now what's going on in 1862? The Civil War. But I want to tell you, our nation was already, that manifest destiny, that angel leading white men across this country from sea to shining sea was already in motion. And we knew that once the Civil War was over, we need to have policies developed so when we get boots on the ground, we can develop our nation. Congress passed the Morrill Act of 1862. This is also when the railroads are coming in. The federal land sold and the proceeds given to the states to fund universities. Oh, that's different. That's different. We've already got, this isn't in lieu of the other's still going on, but now we're going to fund state universities. Now, this would be what we call the agricultural colleges. LSU was started out as an agricultural college. Oh, but we're already a state in early 1800s, 1812. So LSU was not one of these, but Texas A&M is. Texas A&M, Kansas State, Oklahoma State University, Iowa State University. Those are agricultural schools. And so this is for the college level. And guys, we had just a few states quite a few states west of the Appalachian Mountains, and not so many east of the west of the Mississippi River. Oklahoma's not a state. Texas already is, but Kansas, yeah, brand new. Missouri, yeah, 40 years old. But these are going to build universities in their deal. Now, today, this is what we need to focus on. Okay. We still have grants and aid today, but they're really involve these three. There's so much in that book, like revenue sharing, but we don't do that anymore. So I thought, well, we would get to the three types that we have today and discuss them. The first one is categorical grant. We just saw an example of that with the education stuff, but 90% of our federal aid comes through this type of grant. Now, Congress just passed a 1 point something trillion dollar infrastructure bill under Joe Biden and the Democrat Congress last year. Now, the implication of this is hundreds of billions of dollars will flow out of the U.S. Treasury back into the states. So what Governor John Bell and then the future Governor Jeff Landry are going to do is this. We get this money, but these are categorical grants. So Mr. Landry, you can only spend this because the first wave of this we're going to use just to build and strengthen our bridges. The next wave will come through. This will be for improving the substructure of the roads. In other words, repaving, maybe pulling out stuff and laying a better bed and putting more concrete. Some of this stuff is going to be where you oversee the laying of these cables and to make sure that we have broadband, even in Oak Grove, Lake Providence, a good one. All right. So in each one of these, the government is giving the states the money to make those improvements, but it's telling them in what area. That's a categorical grant. Now, what governors like, what they like are block grants. Because here, the money's given to them with less strings attached. Oh, by the way, up here on the categorical grants, I've got this term formula grants. That means is we'll give you the money, but we're going to give you 90% and you have to come up with 10%. So usually there's a formula there. Got to say this, Governor Jindal, when Obamacare came out, Obamacare was going to expand Medicaid. This is the insurance program for people too poor to buy insurance. And if you expand Medicaid, you're raising up the qualifications to determine what is poor. If poor is making $14,000 a year less, then that's poverty. We'll raise that to 18. And so if you're making $18,000 or less, you qualify for free health care. Now, the incentive to the governors was this. You'll get a lot more people to vote for you if you give them free health care. Yeah, that's true. The caveat is that you get more votes and you can stay in power. But Bobby Jindal said no. And the governor of Oklahoma said no. There's about 19 states that the governor said no because here's what they were thinking. Bobby Jindal published it in the newspaper. Yeah, I can get more votes. But am I serving my people well? Because the federal government, while they're paying 90% down, a decade that moves to 80. 2 decades, it moves to only 40%. And the other 60% is being paid by Louisianans in higher state income taxes. Oh, thank you, Bobby Jindal and John Bel Edwards, because he reversed that policy. So, guys, right now, we're talking about policies, governmental policies in effect in the states. Are y'all going to stick around in Louisiana and live in Louisiana when all these higher taxes are upon you and you can move to, 120 miles this way and be in a state that does not have state income taxes? How's that affecting the future of Louisiana? To take and expand programs and push the can of paying for them down on you. I'm not think about that. That's what you need to be thinking about when you vote. So we're in the realm of adulthood. You can't afford to not think about these things. All right. So block grants are broad. We like those. Revenue sharing was a thing of the Nixon administration is, we get all this money, come on, Cole. We get all this money, and we're going to distribute it to the states, and they can spend it how they want to. Man, don't y'all love it when y'all's parents are in that mood, or do they ever get into that mood? Well, here's $100 bill. You're going out. You got a game. You got a youth things going on. Here's $100 bills. Just spend it on what you want to. Or Miss Fulmer, did they say, "Now I'm expecting $80 of this back"? What do? They just give it to you. Are y'all adopting any new kids? I was gonna say. So they don't do revenue sharing anymore. Our great President Ronald Reagan, and by the way, I'll be having some Ronald Reagan quotes up here when we get to the Dave Ramsey stuff, and maybe even before. Man, there's a lot of good ones that pertain to this right here. Okay. Now, the other type are federal mandates. Usually, the issues affects all of the states. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds about the different types, the forms of these. But collectively, guys, they direct our governors, our states, to take action on a particular issue. Usually it deals with the environment, like asbestos. Back in the 80s and early 90s, I was part of a crew that tried to establish a Christian school over at Whites Ferry Road Church. And we got it started. It was doing really good. And in 1986, Congress passes the Asbestos Hazard Act to protect school children from asbestos fibers. Now, what this did is this was a mandate because in our public schools, the ceiling tiles contain something for heat insulation called asbestos. And the fibers, as that deteriorated, would float around in the air, and as we breathe, most of it would be dust, But as we breathe, we'd breathe some of it in, and they were known to be carcinogenic, cause cancer. Big tongue today. Cause cancer. And all public buildings, libraries, schools, post offices, of course that's a federal building, they had to change. They had to be tested to see if they had asbestos. Now, churches was exempt from that. But we had a little problem because we had a school operating in the basement of our church building. And because we were a school, even though we were a Christian school and not a church, we had to be tested for asbestos. And guess what happened? The ceiling tiles in the basement of Whites Ferry Road contained asbestos. And so we had to change those out. We had to change them out. Well, for our beginning school, that was a heck of an expenditure. Okay. And we kind of cheated on that. You're supposed to have hazmat suits on, the mask and all that stuff, and take it and dispose of it properly. And we just got in there and took it down and replaced it. And, but anyway, in some of them, guys, the states are given the ultimatum. You do this, or we're going to come in and do it for you. Like the Clean Air Act. Back in the 70s, our states our major cities and our states had industry. They still do, but they were polluting the air. I remember St. Louis, Missouri, having some of the dirtiest air, almost up there with Los Angeles. And the federal government told Missouri is you got to clean up, you got to improve the air quality of St. Louis. You got to get it done. And not only St. Louis, but others. What did the state of Missouri do? They passed an act to get to this right here. That all of the dump trucks, buses, city buses, city vehicles had to use clean biodiesel fuels. More expensive, but you know what happened to the air quality of St. Louis? It got really good. And Dallas picked it up. I don't know if they still do that or not. And then there's mandates, guys, with the string attached to the aid. States must follow certain requirements, or as a consequence, federal funding for other projects will be cut. Now, I've got Louisiana in here as an example. Mothers Against Drunk Driving was a big thing in the mid-'80s and early '90s. Teenage drinking was nearly at an all-time high. There's just about every time you opened up a newspaper or had a local news come on, some teenager was killed in a drunk driving accident. So they formed Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD. Have y'all heard of them before? I haven't heard of them in a long time. But man, that was a special interest group that got a lot of power in Washington and in our state legislatures to pass laws. And so on the national level, they said, look, let's just raise the national drinking age, which this isn't a reach into the states because states set their own drinking age. In Louisiana, it was 18. Let's raise the drinking age to 21. Louisiana didn't want to do that. Well, but Louisiana likes federal dollars to improve our roads. And so the state of Louisiana was given this ultimatum. If you don't raise your minimum drinking age to 21, we're going to cut the money going to you for roads. So Louisiana did it. Is it still where you can buy liquor here at 18, but you can't drink it until you're 21? No. But that was the case there for several years. It would defy that. How many minutes are we away? One. I think the last one is the benefits. Yeah. So guys, tomorrow we wrap it up with a review and a review of your homework. And then Wednesday we take a test. Audio.
There's my favorite.